I wouldn't normally think of crematoria as interesting places, but a few weeks back, the new or soon-to-be new curate, Christian Hill, and I went to see the crematoria in Plymouth. There are two there and there's one in Torbay, so it's quite a distance, and it's one of the issues that we have here in Salcombe if we have a funeral where afterwards there's going to be a cremation. We've got an hour and a 2-hour journey there and back, so often it's quite impractical, and it's rare that we go out and do full crematoria services. But I gather more and more in the cities, the majority of funerals are actually held in these chapels in crematoria. So our visit was quite an eye-opener. In fact, in some ways, it was like putting our finger to the pulse on the neck of the Church of England, and what we were getting was not a very vibrant beat. Indeed, the story that the director gave was quite shocking, and I'd heard rumours of this, but I didn't believe it, and in a sense I got it here from the horse's mouth. I'd heard that this was happening in Torbay, but in Plymouth, really? The home of the Pilgrim Fathers, where they set off from, that there is such incredible religious decline and disinterest. Let's hope things are changing. But currently, as it stands, 9 out of 10 funerals in the crematoria are done by secular celebrants, one perhaps by a clergy person. The director said that a generation back, not even a generation back, I think he was talking, 15, 20 years, just before the millennium, the opposite was the true. In fact, that the majority of funerals were actually done by vicars. 9 out of 10 crematorium services would have been done by a vicar, priest, minister. And now it's flipped the other way around. What does that say about our engagement with society? It's not brilliant, is it? And we were at a curate's training day a couple of months back when Bishop Robert Atwell, our diocesan bishop, who is the person who oversees liturgy in the Church of England and liturgical policies, said, that when we start losing the funeral business on this sort of scale, it begins to feel like the death knell of the Church of England. I actually left that 2-hour discussion with the funeral director, not the funeral director, the crematorium director, feeling quite upbeat because this felt like a solvable problem. The way he described it is that there's been, over the years, not a breakdown of relationship between vicars and funeral directors so much in the cities, but just a sort of a parting of the ways, and that typically in Plymouth, funeral directors, undertakers would tell clients, you don't want to bother the vicar, or do you really want a vicar, or are you religious? And people would sort of think, well, I'm not sure I want to go down that way, whereas a generation back, most people would have culturally thought themselves as C of E. Here now, that's changed, and that tells us something about society's religious mores, and how we deal with that is going to be important. But certainly this has seemed to me like a problem that could be solvable, in that it involves really reaching out to undertakers and creating a bit of a cultural change. Luckily here in Salcombe, we're very much like Cluedo, really. It's an old-fashioned community, and the church is geographically and spiritually at the centre of the community. I know that if someone dies, the likelihood is that I'll be doing the funeral in a couple of weeks' time. It's really quite rare, actually, here. I'm trying to think this. In this past year, I've probably heard of one person who went and had, in the town, and went and had a non-religious funeral. I think it was conducted by the funeral director. And even then afterwards, there was an approach to perhaps we could have a memorial service in the church. I'm very lucky in that respect. and long may it continue. And I want to encourage that sense of Anglican culture within our little town here, so that that keeps the church at the heart of everything that we do and say in this town. But obviously it's not the case there in the bigger cities, and that strikes me as quite bleak. But it is turnaroundable, particularly with funeral services. This is something that we should be really good at. And that doesn't mean, I don't think that means selling out doctrinally at all. I think people actually appreciate our genuineness and the fact that we're offering something authentic. And though funeral services have changed over the last few decades, I think more recently there's been something of a move back to tradition in a positive sense. That a lot of services have been, yes, a bit Eamon Andrews, in that I mean that they're a reflection of that person's life, and a series of speakers plus the vicar might eulogise around that person's quirkiness or achievements or likes and dislikes. And yet I think in the Anglican liturgy we are able to say that was the past, now let's think also of the future, the eternal horizon that person's entering into, and also about the here and now and the present, and what we're doing. What does commending to God mean? What does praying for that person mean here and now? We're able to do those things in ways that are creative and cosmic, that are completely different from anything that what a secular celebrant or a humanist celebrant might be able to offer. And yes, with a humanist or a secular celebrant, you'll be able to have whatever you like, and in the secular celebrants' frame, it can mean that they will offer they'll offer prayers as well if you want that. And you can have John Lennon's Imagine or Frank Sinatra's I Did It My Way, and you can be rest assured that unlike with the vicar, there isn't going to be any raising of the eyebrows at that point. However, I think people desire something deeper, and I've always had a great faith in the general public, and particularly in the British public, who appreciate depth and respond to that. And I think over the next few podcasts, I want to reflect on that as well. I have to say, one of the most fascinating things was in getting the tour of the ovens and seeing how that operated and learning something about the science of that. It was fascinating to see the buckets of spare knees and hips and that obviously don't melt because they're metallic, and the crematoria apparently have a real issue as to what to do with them in terms of recycling. Some of that metal is so strong it's very hard to melt. So it was a bit fascinating in a macabre sense to see these giant buckets with hundreds upon hundreds of knees, hips. There was a spinal thing that I saw that had, this is a bit creepy, Phillips screws that obviously had got into the person's spine. Ouch. I just had an idea that some of that material would be a little bit more bionic, a little bit more, I don't know, not so brutal looking, but there you go. The other fascinating thing about the tour was that Plymouth at some point is planning to get a new creme de la creme crematorium near the Marsh Mills, roundabout, which, if you don't know, Plymouth is really in essence at the entrance of the city, so you don't have to navigate your way around the city if you've come in from the Shire. And as convenient that is, the plans, I have to say, were a little Disney, somewhat. It looked more in the lines of a glorious shopping mall, really. I don't know. There were no crosses, and they're not called chapels anymore. Apparently, in the new scheme of things, they are commemoration or celebration halls. I don't know. That doesn't really excite me in any way. And I think it seems to show that the architect has gone for a de-Christianised, secular space. And I think the church could respond to that positively as well as an organisation. So that's the end of the podcast for today. And next time I think I'll reflect a little bit on the touchy subject of Brexit and transcendentals and what that means, and social media and the bubbles we all exist in. Take care, God bless, thanks very much.